Find the derivative of g of x equals the square root of x cubed times cosine of 6x. So g of x is the square root of an entire expression, which itself is a product, x cubed times the cosine of 6x, which hints at how to take the derivative. The first thing I'm going to do is rewrite that square root as a fractional exponent. It is first power, second root, so 1/2 power. And that's the outermost function, so we're going to start with that, the power rule on that 1/2 power. But as part of the chain rule, we have to take the derivative of the inside, and the inside is a product, so the chain rule will make a product rule happen here. So our derivative, g prime of x, will be start with the power rule, bring the 1/2 down, x cubed cosine 6x, leave all that alone, subtract 1 from the power, I will call that minus 2/2, and now we multiply by the derivative of the inside, which is all of this, to complete the chain rule. Well, that is a product, and therefore we have to make use of the product rule for the derivative of the inside. The derivative of the first, derivative of x cubed, is 3x squared times the second left alone plus the first left alone times the derivative of the second. Well, the second is the cosine of 6x. The derivative of that is negative sine. Leave its inside alone, 6x, but then we have to multiply by the derivative of its inside to complete its chain rule. So our g prime of x here is now equal to, we have a 1/2, we have x cubed cosine of 6x raised to the 1 minus 2, which is negative 1/2. And inside of here, I'm going to leave the first term alone, 3x squared cosine of 6x. And the second term, I'm going to move the constants to the front. Everything's multiplied. We have a negative, we have a 6. So I will have a negative 6, and then I have the x cubed, and I have the sine of 6x. The next thing to do is to move the negative exponent, this, to the denominator. That means it'll move down there with that 2. And everything else is in the numerator. The numerator is at 1, and that quantity in the square brackets multiplying each other. Anything times 1 is itself, so I will really just have the 3x squared cosine of 6x minus the 6x cubed sine of 6x, all divided by, and the 2 is in the denominator with this move down, which will make it a positive 1/2 power. So g prime of x will now be, now this numerator, we can factor some things out of here. Actually, we can factor out a constant of 3, and it looks like we can factor out a power of x as well. We have a squared power here, a cubed power. We can factor out the lower one, that's the x squared. So we'll take out a 3 and x squared. Now, taking out the 3, that'll take that out, and that'll leave that as a 2. And taking out the x squared, that'll take that out, and that'll leave 1x there. So there's kind of the idea of what would be left. So that'll leave us a 1 times the cosine of 6x, and then we'll have a minus 2x. One of the x's will be left over there, and then sine of 6x. And then all of this is divided by, and in the denominator we have 2 times a quantity to the 1/2. Well, 1/2 power means the square root to the first power, so I'll rewrite that as square root of x cubed cosine of 6x. It is possible to actually simplify this a little bit further, because this x in the numerator and this x in the denominator actually can combine. We have to separate that denominator a little bit first. So I will write this as 3x squared times the cosine of 6x minus 2x sine 6x. I'm going to leave all that alone. But the denominator, I'm going to separate into 2 square root of x cubed and square root of cosine 6x. Because the square root of x cubed can be rewritten. And it's going to rewrite, and actually before I write the numerator, I'm going to rewrite the denominator because it'll help us with the numerator. It can rewrite as, well, it's 3 power second root, so 3/2 power. Now the whole reason for doing that is it will cancel with some of the x's in the numerator. Now in the numerator we have x squared, and x squared I'm going to rewrite, instead of a 2, I'm going to call it 4/2, because to cancel we subtract the exponents from the division, and we're going to subtract those there. And they're now over a common denominator for the subtraction. That just will make the subtraction more possible. And then we have this other quantity in the numerator of cosine of 6x minus 2x sine of 6x. I'm not going to do anything with that. But now let's combine by subtraction of exponents. So g prime of x will equal, in the numerator we have 3, and then x to the 4/2 minus 3/2. 4/2 minus 3/2 is going to leave us with 1/2. We subtract them. We cancel it out fully in the denominator, and that takes out 3/2 from there, and that'll be left with a 1/2. So it'll be 3x to the 1/2. We have the cosine 6x minus the 2x sine 6x, and then all of this divided by 2 square root of cosine 6x. The only other thing that we can do is that x to the 1/2 in the numerator, that can be rewritten as the square root of x. So let's rewrite it that way. Other than that, everything else will stay as is. Including the denominator here. And there's our derivative g prime of x.